Welcome to Unedited Economics. Today we're talking about comparative government, specifically the United Kingdom. So let's start out with why the United Kingdom. So most of the time people study the United Kingdom to compare to other countries due to them having such a huge influence in the development of other countries. They have massive democratization and decentralization, and a long history of imperialism and monarchy. Many people have copied their systems, whatever time their system is at. They were the first to jump on the Industrial Revolution. They've dealt with both conservative and liberal policies, and some of their parties are the strongest parties on the face of the earth. So let's get started. So, the UK's formal name is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The countries include England, Scotland, Wales, and the northern part of Ireland. Don't be confused, it's not Ireland, just the northern part. There are about 63 million residents in the UK. A 5/6 of those live in England, which is about 5/6 of the 53 million live in London. Live in England. A lot of them live in London, don't get me wrong. It is a multi-ethnic state. So most of the immigrants in the UK come from the Indian subcontinent, and another 1/4 of those come from the Caribbean. So it's a pretty diverse place, relatively. So it all started with Britain's allegiance to the crown, which has been sovereign and remained in charge of the regime for many, many years. We'll get to that. It changes. So it all started with the Celts, the Romans, the Anglo-Saxons, the Danes, and the Normans, who all came to the UK and left a little bit of their culture. We got English from the German, Anglo-Saxons. A lot of the UK's laws started with common law, which was brought over by the Danish Vikings. They also brought in feudalism. And then most of this became official with the Magna Carta in 1215. There were a lot of religious divides when it came to Henry VIII as we go on in history. So he wanted a state-controlled Protestant church, what will soon be known as the Church of England. And a lot of people fought against it, but lo and behold, it exists, so he won. So let's talk about how the modern British state came around. So James I and Charles I got to talking with Parliament, which caused the English Civil War, and Parliament won, so the king lost an awful lot of power. Parliament threw James II out of office, out of the throne, and Parliament became the supreme ruler of the UK. That was called the Glorious Revolution. That will probably come up on the AP test. And George I relied on his cabinet and his prime minister, which helped give those two positions a lot more power. The first prime minister was known as Sir Robert Walpole, and he was picked by Parliament, which started the long tradition. So let's skip that. Then we get to the British Commonwealth, which includes the UK and 54 former countries, which all started from their long history of imperialism. But before we get to the imperialism, let's talk about the Industrial Revolution. So the UK was the first to jump on the Industrial Revolution bandwagon. It developed slowly as they were the ones developing it. A lot of it relied on textiles, machines, iron. This all came with some invention. And they reaped all the benefits of early industrialization. They spent lots of money and brought in lots of money. Trade was massive. So when we start to move away from the monarchy system and hit some democratization. So Parliament has two houses, the House of Lords and the House of Commons. The parties developed with different parts of society. We've got the liberal Whigs and the conservative Tories, which will come up very important. So there was a lot of reforms set by the Whigs, especially 1832. That's a key date, which doubled the voting size of the UK, but still excluded 90% of adults. And then in 1928, the women over the age of 21 could vote. And all of these voters helped bring about the Labour Party because these new voters were more liberal. So important keys about the Liberal Party is they wanted improved working conditions because many people in the Labour Party were part of the working class. They also wanted healthcare, education, housing. They wanted more representation of the working class, which is still an issue they were dealing with in the early 20th century, and it's issues that they're dealing with today. So after World War II, there was a lot of problems, especially hung parliament. So there's a collectivist consensus after World War II that it ended up in some bad economic times in the 1970s. So Margaret Thatcher ended this collectivist consensus. And then the Labour Party became known as New Labour and adopted the Third Way program, which was a way to end the hung parliament. If you don't know about that, go to Wikipedia. I'm not a god, or am I? So then let's move on to some of the political regimes of the UK. So let's start with the Constitution. So the UK has no single constitution, but it does have a series of documents on which it does rely. So we've got the Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights, Act of Union, 1707, which united Scotland and England. Then we've got the European Convention on Human Rights. I guess they don't really listen to that. And then we got the Great Reform of 1832, all important for the comparative AP test. So then we get to what's known as the Crown, which is Synecdoche. She's the position, but let's face it, Queen of England's gonna be the Queen for eternity. Very kind of a ceremonial figure. She's got jobs such as opening Parliament, which I hear is like an 8-hour ceremony. She signs bills. She could veto something, but she doesn't. And she's kind of a symbol of legitimacy for the government. It's just something to look up to. She's technically in charge of the armed forces, but Parliament kind of takes power of that. So I thought something was really interesting is that only Protestants can take the throne. This is mostly based on the whole Church of England situation, but I could see that changing in the future. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm an American. So let's get down to the branches of government, starting with the Prime Minister. This is the head of government. The Crown, that's the head of state. The Prime Minister, this is the head of government, which is selected by legislature. And then the Prime Minister selects his cabinet members. And if any time, it's kind of like an American impeachment, it's called the vote of no confidence. It's when Parliament can reassess their evaluation of the Prime Minister. So when we get to the cabinet, everybody in the cabinet is in charge of one sector of the government, if it be education or healthcare or anything to specifically educate the Prime Minister on what's going on and possibly help lead the bureaucracy, just like the American cabinet. So the legislature has 650 peers, elected for 5 years. So does the oh, my notes are all messed up. This is why I do this. I didn't separate the House of Lords and the House of Commons, which I think is going to be very crucial. If anyone from the UK wants to leave some suggestions in the comments for my notes. So the House of Lords is virtually powerless. It's got about 800 members, comprised of, there's 92 life peers, which are people who come back and then they can let their family take their position when they die or have an heir to their throne, really. So the House of Lords can propose amendments, but really it's the House of Commons that are in charge of amendments. The House of Lords can delay bills, given good reason. So the House of Commons is everyone follows their party. The House of Commons only works because everyone is dedicated to the party in which they follow. The way that they are elected is a single-member district, also known as first past the post. So there's only one member elected per district, and they get everything. It's not a proportional system. So there's two dominant parties, which we talked about, and there's a couple of smaller parties. Like there's the Scottish Party, which I think is like Cymru or something like that. And there's a unitary state. Local government is unitary. And there's a lot of marble government is what they call it, where some of it is the federal government, some of it is the local government. The powers all are concurrent. So then we get into London, which specifically London directly elects their mayors. And it's a note to say that Northern Ireland has its own legislature, and each part of the UK has its own cabinet member. What's also really important to touch on is the Good Friday Agreement, which allowed for the re-establishment of the Northern Ireland Assembly, which was originally taken away. So then we get into the party system. So there's two parties, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. After the 70s, the Liberal Democratic Party became more powerful as the working class became more vocal. So Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland all had regime changes, trying to get their party to be a little bit more powerful. So starting with the Labour Party, it was initially comprised of working class people, as when it was founded, most of the UK was working class. It became extremely dominant during World War II, when many people, mostly the entire country, was working class. The Labour Party is a little bit more liberal, with social and social democratic agendas. And then it's changed over time as the blue-collar jobs have been more prevalent. It's a little bit more like the Democratic Party in the United States. And then we get into the Conservative Party, which is a lot like the United States Conservative Party. There's actually a lot of internal struggle in the Conservative Party, as there's traditional conservatism and a little bit more moderate conservatism, which creates a little bit of friction. And not everything gets done as quickly as it possibly could. But the same could be said for the Labour Party. There are sects. So the Liberal Democrats is a third party.